Raul Rosas Jr. set to make his UFC debut. He just turned 18 back in October, looking to take on the former CES and Cage Titans bantamweight champ, the Joker, Jay Perrin, who switched his nickname. He used to be Savage Jay Perrin. The Joker, it is what it is, but a couple of fights under his belt with the UFC. Took his debut on 4 days' notice against Mario Bautista. Withstood that test, lost the decision his last time out. Lost the decision that was somewhat controversial against Aoriqi Long. He unleashed a wicked combination about the last 20 seconds of that fight. Surprised that Aoriqi Long didn't go down, but an amazing fight in that one. And we have a great pairing coming up this weekend. We talked a lot about Raul Rosas Jr. Before his Dana White's Contender Series debut against Mando Gutierrez. We're going to throw it back to that Contender Series preview, talk about the fight, and really try and hammer home a pick on this one, because it could be a little bit. But Matt, Raul Rosas Jr. coming in at 17 years old. This guy is the prospect. This guy is stealing the headlines. This guy is going out there, lots of interviews. He's just a few weeks away from his 18th birthday, so the parents still have to sign the permission slip for him to be able to fight. All of his fights have taken place in Mexico. This is his first fight in the States. The fights they had with UWC is the organization. You've seen UWC fighters come into the UFC. Just like every other fighter that's on this card, has not fought the best level of competition. The fighters he's faced, 0-1, 0-0, 1-0, 2-0, and 0-2. But who the hell wants to fight a kid that's like 16, 17 years old? That's got to be the hard thing. Am I the only one who feels
kind of weird about this?
Yeah,
like, everything we know about concussions and CTE and stuff at this point, like Will Smith made a pretty good movie about it that just focused on football, and I think we all understand just how violent of a sport MMA is compared to a sport like football, so I'm sure that's a real thing in this sport as well. My point being is, it is just a little weird, isn't it? Like, I'm not saying you have to feel super uncomfortable about it. You don't get to join PETA to say there's something wrong about this fight. I'm just saying, it's a little strange. That's all. Like, there's enough good fighters on the regional scene who are looking for an opportunity like this that you don't need to have some sort of weird, for lack of a better term, a freak show fight. This is like drafting Manute Ball and Muggsy Bogues on the same team just to draw up attendance. Like, you don't need to do these weird gimmicky things. Contender Series already has a pretty big following. It already guarantees fighters a UFC spot basically at this point if they win. So it's a weird situation. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, it feels like a developmental deal if he wins, because I know
you're right.
Nickel had to fight twice, and for Rosas Jr., the other thing, there's only 11 weeks in this year's season of Contender Series, so it's not like they're going to bring him back for another episode. But he started off as an amateur at 15. He started training in MMA at age 4 because his dad got into MMA late in his dad's life, so he just kind of brought Raul with him to the gym, and he is a really impressive fighter. I mean, he trains out of Syndicate, 10 Planet Jiu-Jitsu in Las Vegas, and in the promo pack, they kind of had him take shots at Aljamain Sterling, Marlon Vera, and Piotr Jan's game, which is really awkward. That'd be like me playing hockey in a beer league and then going, geez, well, Connor McDavid, he doesn't play good defense. It's Sidney Crosby. He could get more points every year. Like, it was a weird look for me.
I've heard you talk after those games, Craig. That's basically what it is.
But both of these guys, Matt, a little bit of an amateur record. You look at both of these guys, their fighting styles match up so well, because I will tell you this, and I'll hand it off to you this way, Matt. These guys both fight the same way. They both go balls to the wall in the first minute and a half, and usually the fight ends in the first round. Well, for Rosas Jr., all of them have finished very, very quickly. They power grapple, they power strike. They have styles that are conducive to getting finished or getting finishes very quickly, and not to conserving gas tanks. And you might go, well, Craig, it's a 17-year-old. He's going to have a really good gas tank. How do you know? He's only ever gone completely balls to the wall very early in fights. So I don't know what his gas tank's going to look like in the second round.
Think about how poorly you treated your body when you were 17. Like, I played basketball and would eat 9 meals at McDonald's in between games.
National championship athlete at 17, Matt. What? Softball Canada. Let's go.
Okay, Craig, settle down. I was eating like 9 junior chickens in between basketball games and putting up numbers, okay? Like, you can do that kind of stuff when you're 17 years old and get away with it. So maybe Raul, there's old man strength. There might be young man hunger. You can cut as much weight as you want to. You can eat whatever you want to, get away with it. I like the grappling out of Rosas, though. I must say, he is a handful on the mat when he is able to get it there. And you could tell, just like what you had said, he's been doing this for a long time, too. And that's a wild thing to say about a kid who's only 17 years old, because he does have such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the grappling side of things. And what we had said about Ankalaev earlier on the card has to be said for Rosas, too. He's going to get better. At 17 years of age, we're not even looking at the canvas. We're window shopping for the painting supplies at this point. So I think there is going to be a very successful career at one point. It's just, Sage Northcutt, Mickey Gall, there's so many fighters who get off to this really young start. Sinead Cooper, exactly. Who get off to these,
not Jay Cooper.
Who get off to these really early starts, don't look good, and then they just sort of flare out. We never hear from them again. There's 15 fighters like that for every one Song Yadong who actually like makes it to the top young and can look really good. So hopefully we just get a really good performance out of both these guys. Neither one is that concussive of a striker, if we're being completely honest. So I'm not really expecting it to be a back and forth brawl. I do think if both guys get tired, we are going to result into much more of a grappling type of fight between these two guys. So I favor Rosas just for his grappling, because I think that's how the fight's going to go. But this is a tough fight to pick just because of the age X factor, if you will.
All right, so hopefully you learned a little bit about Raul Rosas Jr.'s last time out. Picked up the decision over Armando Gutierrez, 30-27s across the board, 11 minutes and 55 seconds of control time. Matt, I thought Armando Gutierrez might even win that fight. I thought he had a really good chance. He was a good fighter, great amateur background. I think he was 7-1 before that fight. But he kept pulling for guillotines and giving the position to Rosas, and then also getting taken down quite a bit.
Which isn't great. But the thing about Rosas is he is a pretty good wrestler for his age. And that is the thing that you kind of have to say a lot, because it is wild that an 18-year-old is in the UFC.
Listen to an interview that Jay Perrin did with the All-Star MMA and JHK, and he hates that people have to consider Rosas that way. Like the old, he's good for his age.
You worry about an 18-year-old, though. Like, again, I brought this up in our previous prediction. Yeah. Like, Cyril Gahn, I wasn't sold on him until he was in a hard fight. Do you think I think an 18-year-old can get into a war with Jay Perrin? No. I don't. I'm sorry. I just don't think he has the level of experience yet. Not only in fighting, but like, I'm gonna say like Brown Black, but in life too, to actually be able to withstand some type of a fight like that. Like, you gotta dig down deep to make it in a really difficult fight in MMA. Like, think about Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler, for instance, and think about anybody else in any other sport. Like, James Harden might have to run a pick and roll with a hurt hamstring. Michael Chandler had a flat nose that was leaking blood, and he was still like trying to knock out someone else. I don't know if Rosas Jr. is gonna be able to get into that type of a fight against Jay Perrin, but Rosas is a good enough grappler to avoid a lot of the damaging strikes that potentially Jay Perrin's going to be able to hit him with. And I wonder how far that's going to be able to carry Rosas throughout the early parts of his UFC career, because this is a wild person to quote, but I remember Eddie Bravo was talking about Tony Ferguson. He was just saying about bringing him into like 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. And I thought it was a really interesting perspective, because he had said, yeah, when I get a striker who's now coming to Jiu-Jitsu, I might have him for a 6-month period. I might be in his corner. I'm not telling him to pull guillotine and like pull guard trying to work up triangles. What I want to do is get him through that fight so I have another 6 months with him. So I have another 6 months, and then we can start to build on those skills. With Raul Rosas Jr., it's going to take him a little bit of time to really start to develop the full set of well-rounded skills that he will need to start beating potential contenders in this bantamweight division. But I think this is a good early fight for him against Jay Perrin, because he offers very obvious difficulties on the feet with his combinations. But if Rosas is able to get the fight to the mat, he should be able to be the much more controlling fighter.
Well, and the quotable that I got out of that interview that Jay Perrin had with JHK was, I mean, the thing is that he's still a young man. You know what I mean? Again, he's going to grow up and be something crazy good. And then further to it, not a top caliber UFC fighter just yet. So that kind of is...
It'd be wild if he was at 18.
Could you imagine? But if you look at it for Rosas Jr., and Perrin had kind of talked about it, the fact that they had a couple of rounds to spar together. But Rosas Jr. has kind of bounced around between gyms. He spent time at 10th Planet, at Syndicate. We threw it up there, or I threw it up there. Lost Boys Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. We've seen the Kosi brothers train
out there. Do you
like
like that for a young fighter kind of bouncing around early in their career? I don't mind it, just trying to pick up as many skills as they like until they settle down. But I guess you could have different perspectives.
Jay Perrin kind of said, like, Rosas would kind of hang out more with his brother and his dad, and they kind of, spend time on their own in the gym training. I don't know. I've never been to the gym, so I don't know. You'd have to listen to that interview that Jay Perrin did. But when you look at it for Perrin, CES Cage Titans Bantamweight champ. He was on Contender Series back in, 2019. He fought Dwight Joseph. He lost by decision. A lot of people thought that he won that fight. It was the power of Joseph versus a lot of the volume and the good shots of Perrin. Perrin will get hit, and he doesn't really eat leg kicks all that well, but he is a pretty good striker in his own right. He is a good kind of slippery grappler in his own right. He's just a really well-rounded fighter. He's out of syndicate, training primarily with a guy who's cornered him in the past, and Vince Morales, but also Ludwig Shalinyan to get ready for this fight. And if Ludwig's anything, he's a wrestler.
He
so
is.
I think Ludwig is the perfect guy to train with for a fight like this, because Ludwig's not going to offer up much on the feet, but he's just going to continue to try and take you down. So for Jay Perrin, getting ready for this fight, obviously it's interesting. He's a scrappy guy. His grandfather trained Irish Mickey Ward. They're always going to talk about that one. I know you love that one, but the pride of Lowell, Massachusetts. He used to train at a Sitya Tong, which is Mark Delagrati's gym, who really was a great, what was it, The Mind of a Fighter book that I read with Sam Sheridan. There's a giant part from Mark Delagrati in that one, so pick that book up and give that one a read. But in this one, Rosas, power takedowns, really likes to get the back. He's really submission over position in a lot of these spots, so we'll see how it plays out. And I look at him, I know he only has 2 inches of height and 1 inch of reach, is probably the bigger fighter in this one, which is saying something for an 18-year-old fighter because he hasn't really grown into his body just yet.
A lot of weight, though.
The odds in this one, Rosas open to -200, -217. Perrin open +170, +200. We have a look at the Topology votes. Surprise to us there to you. I'm going to say over under 85% Rosas Jr.
I'll say under.
And it's way over. 760 total votes. 93% Rosas Jr. 54% by decision. 33% by submission. For the 7% that have Perrin, 65% by decision. I'm surprised this fight isn't somewhere closer to par.
I am too, but I have to go back to a theory that I bring up at the UFC a lot. They're a lot more like a lot of boxing organizations than we really realize. And they have a prospect who's 18 years old. Do you think they want him getting brutally finished on a pay-per-view undercard? No, they don't.
I don't think they want to Chase Hooper to do that either, and it keeps happening.
That's true, but it has worked out. Look at Song Yadong. He's had a very successful career, and I know for every positive example we bring up a negative example too, and that's why it's always so interesting, because it does seem to happen. I brought this up earlier. It's happened, 2 times a year, I say? You've got a fighter that they sign who's 19 to 21 about, and it's, hey, we're going to throw them into the deep end. If they look really good, then we're going to have a really promising prospect on our hands, and if they don't, then it is really hard for them to kind of regain their composure and get back to a really good position. I ever so slightly think Rosas is going to be able to avoid the bigger shots of Jay Perrin, get a lot of those takedowns. I don't think this is going to be a pretty fight, though, if I'm being completely honest. I don't think Rosas is going to do a submission. I do think this is going to go to a decision, but I think overall he is going to show that just the bigger guy physically and with his wrestling advantage that he should be able to win.
Yeah, I think Jay Perrin has obviously the gifts on the feet to get the win in this matchup. He's a much better striker. For Rosas, the only time we've seen him strike is when he strikes to get into the clinch to take guys down, and that was with UWC when he was fighting in Mexico because he was under 17, and I'm assuming they didn't need a permission slip signed in Mexico. I don't know how it works, but I know they did in Vegas when he fought on Contender Series when he was still 17. I like Rosas with the fact that I think he can chain the takedowns together. The thing that I said, though, in that video that kind of makes me hesitate a little is, what's his cardio like? We saw it against Gutierrez. It wasn't that bad, but we haven't really seen it tested all that much. Whereas for Perrin, he seems to be a cardio king. He turns it on in the third rounds of his fight. So if you really do like Jay Perrin, make a good case down below in the comments section. Both of us going with Raul Rosas Jr. ever so slightly. I think it's going to be a great fight for what it's worth. And the next fight is Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Chris Daukaus. An amazing banger at 265. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.